My mom smiled. Some kids are just smarter than others. She looked at my sister's daughter. Mine went quiet. I nodded and said, "Good. Then the smart one can cover her mom's expenses." My sister's smile dropped. And then my name is Laurel. And before I get into what happened at that kitchen table, I need to ask you something first. Have you ever watched someone you love get quietly erased? Not dramatically. Not with shouting or slammed doors. Just slowly made to feel like less. Like they take up too much space. Like they're the wrong answer to a question nobody asked out loud. That's what was happening to my daughter, Maisie. And for years, I let it slide. I smiled through it. I changed the subject. I told myself my mother didn't mean it that way. I was wrong. My mom's name is Patricia. She's 67, sharp-tongued, and she has this particular gift. She can say something devastating and then look at you like you're the one overreacting. She's been doing it her whole life. My dad, Ronald, learned to go quiet around her decades ago. He just sort of drifted into the wallpaper of our family home in Dayton, Ohio, nodding, agreeing, pouring his coffee and leaving the room. My sister's name is Brenda, 3 years older than me, and she has always been, in my mother's words, not mine, the gifted one. Brenda got the praise at dinner. Brenda got the framed report cards. Brenda got the phone calls that lasted an hour, while mine lasted 12 minutes. I counted once. Don't judge me. You would have counted too. Brenda has a daughter named Kaylee. Kaylee is 11. She's a perfectly fine kid, she really is. But she's been told since birth that she's exceptional, brilliant, destined for something great. And you know what happens when a child is told that constantly? They start to believe other kids are less. Kids like my Maisie. Maisie is 9. She's quiet, she thinks before she speaks. She draws these incredibly detailed horses in her notebooks. And she once asked me why the sky isn't the same color blue every day. She is, without question, the most interesting person I know. But to Patricia, Maisie is just there. Background noise. A placeholder grandchild. And I had been absorbing that on her behalf for 4 years. Do you think that's normal? Because I genuinely thought it was for a while. Thought this is just how families are. Everyone has a favorite. It'll balance out. Didn't balance out. Got worse. Last Thanksgiving, we were all gathered at my mother's house. The same house I grew up in, with the same yellow curtains and the same ceramic rooster on the counter that I have hated since 1994. Brenda had driven up from Columbus with Kaylee, and my mother had spent the entire morning making Kaylee's favorite pie, setting Kaylee's favorite show on in the living room, and asking Kaylee approximately 47 questions about school. Maisie sat next to me at the counter, quietly coloring, not saying a word. And I was already tense, already watching, because I knew my mother. I knew her rhythms. I knew the way she built up to things. Then it happened. My mom was talking about Kaylee's school, some enrichment program, some gifted track thing, and she got this look on her face. This warm, proud, proprietary look. And she smiled, that specific smile she has, and she said, "Some kids are just smarter than others." And she looked directly at Kaylee when she said it. And then her eyes moved, just briefly, to Maisie. It was a second, maybe less, but Maisie felt it. I saw her go still. That particular kind of still that children go when they're deciding whether or not to cry and they're hoping no one notices. Noticed. Something in my chest shifted. Not quite anger yet, more like a door swinging open onto anger, and something came out of my mouth before I even fully decided to say it. I nodded very calmly and said, "Good. Then the smart one can cover her mom's expenses." The room went quiet. Brenda's smile dropped so fast I almost felt bad. Almost. My mother blinked at me. My dad, somewhere behind me, made a small sound like a man who had just stepped on a rake. And then, what came after that sentence was not what any of us expected, including me. Do you think what I said was wrong? Because there are days I replay it and think, yes, Laurel, that was exactly right. And there are days I think you just started a war at Thanksgiving, you absolute disaster. Both things might be true. What I can tell you is that it was not the end of that conversation. It was barely the beginning. Because Brenda had a lot to say back to me. And my mother, instead of stepping in like a reasonable adult, chose a side immediately. Spoiler, it wasn't mine. What happened over the next several weeks changed everything. Not just between me and Brenda, but between me and my mother, me and my daughter, and honestly between me and the version of myself that had been quietly nodding along for 30-something years. That version is gone now. And I don't miss her one bit. Stay with me. So there I was, standing in my mother's kitchen with the word expenses still hanging in the air like smoke. Brenda recovered first. She always does. She straightened up, crossed her arms and said very quietly, "That was unnecessary, Laurel." And I said just as quietly, "So was what Mom just said." But here we are. Patricia did something that genuinely shocked me. She didn't apologize. She didn't even acknowledge what she'd said. She just turned back to the stove and started stirring something that absolutely did not need stirring. Like she'd already moved on. Like the conversation was over because she had decided it was over. That is her superpower. Deciding when things are done. She says something that lands like a brick, then walks away from the rubble and expects everyone else to clean it up. I picked up Maisie's coloring book, took her hand and walked us into the living room. Not storming out. Not dramatic. Listen. Maisie looked up at me and whispered, "Mommy, are you mad?" "No, baby. I'm just thinking." Which was a lie. I was furious. But she's 9, and she didn't need to carry my anger on top of whatever she was already quietly processing. My dad followed us in a few minutes later. He sat in his armchair, the brown one with the broken armrest that nobody has fixed since 2011, and looked at me with something tired and honest in his eyes. "She doesn't mean it the way it sounds," he said. "Dad, she means it exactly the way it sounds. We just keep agreeing not to say so." He didn't argue, just nodded slowly and looked at the floor. That silence told me more than any conversation we'd ever had. Dinner happened anyway. Because it always does, even when it shouldn't. We passed dishes and made small talk and pretended the kitchen hadn't just happened. My mother complimented Kaylee's hair twice. She told Maisie her mashed potatoes were getting cold. That was the whole interaction. When we finally left and I had Maisie buckled in the back seat, she looked out the window and said very matter-of-factly, "Grandma likes Kaylee more than me, doesn't she?" Not a question. Conclusion. The kind kids arrive at when they've already done the math and they're just checking if an adult will be honest with them. I said, "Grandma has a hard time showing love equally. That's her problem, not yours. You are not less than anyone. Not anyone." She said okay and looked out the window. Just, okay. Like she was filing it away to think about later. That's my kid. I drove home with this quiet, settled kind of anger. The kind that doesn't explode. Just gets organized. Because here's something I hadn't mentioned yet. Brenda, for all the praise and the gifted track mythology, has borrowed money from my mother more than once. Money that never comes back. My mother never brings it up. Just quietly absorbs it like she absorbs everything from Brenda. Meanwhile, I have never asked my mother for a single dollar. Raised Maisie largely alone after my divorce from Craig. Built my own life. But credit for that. Take a wild guess. So my comment about expenses wasn't just a sharp remark. It was years of truth that nobody had been willing to say out loud. And Brenda knew it. Which is exactly why her smile dropped so fast. I thought it was over after that night. Some tension, the holidays would pass, and we'd go back to our carefully maintained family performance. Then 3 days later my mother called. She had a proposition. Calm, rehearsed, and involving Brenda, money, and something she wanted me to do. And the worst part of me actually understood why she was asking. That was the part that got me. Stay with me because this is where things get really interesting. My mother's voice on the phone was the version I like least. Soft, reasonable, like she was doing me a favor by calling. She said Brenda was going through a rough patch. That Kaylee's school had some extra costs coming up. That it would mean a lot to her, to the family, if I could help contribute. Just temporarily. Just until Brenda got back on her feet. I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, "Mom, you just compared my daughter unfavorably to Brenda's in front of both of them. And now you're calling to ask me to fund Kaylee's school expenses." Silence. "It's not like that, Laurel. What's it like then? Walk me through it." She didn't walk me through it. She pivoted, said I was being sensitive, that I always made everything harder than it needed to be. That Brenda needed support right now and family shows up for each other. Do you see what she did there? Family shows up for each other. Aimed directly at me. Like I was the one failing the family. Not the woman who just quietly implied my daughter was the slow one at Thanksgiving dinner. I said very evenly, "I'll think about it." And I hung up. Now I want to be honest with you here. A part of me, the part that had spent 36 years being the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who never asked for anything, that part genuinely considered it. Because that's what happens when you've been conditioned your whole life to keep the peace. Your first instinct is still to reach for the olive branch even when someone just hit you with it. But another part of me, the part that had watched Maisie go still and quiet at that counter, that part said absolutely not. I called my Aunt Deborah that evening. My mother's older sister lives in Cincinnati. Has exactly zero patience for Patricia's particular brand of favoritism because she grew up watching it too. Deborah has been my quiet corner my entire life. She picked up on the second ring, listened to the whole thing without interrupting, and then said, "Laurel, baby. You already know what to do. You're just calling me to make sure you're not crazy." She was right. I wasn't crazy. I decided I wasn't going to contribute a single dollar to Brenda's expenses. But I also decided something else, something that felt a little petty and a little brilliant at the same time. I was going to start keeping receipts. Figuratively and literally. Every time my mother called Kaylee exceptional, I was going to quietly document it. Every time Maisie was overlooked, no birthday call, no interest in her drawings, no questions about her life, I was going to write it down. Not to wave it in anyone's face immediately. Just to have it. Just so I could stop gaslighting myself into thinking I was imagining things. Does that sound extreme? Maybe. But when you've spent years being told you're too sensitive, you start to need evidence even for your own peace of mind. What I did not expect was for Brenda to call me herself. She called on a Tuesday night, which was already suspicious because Brenda and I don't have Tuesday night phone calls. We barely have any phone calls. She opened with small talk. "How's Maisie, how's work, cold weather lately?" And I let her go through the whole routine before I said, "Brenda, Mom called me." Another silence. A different kind from my mother's. Less controlled. "I figured," she finally said. "So you knew she was going to ask me." "I didn't ask her to. But you didn't stop her either." She didn't have an answer for that. And honestly, that non-answer told me everything. Because Brenda isn't a villain. I want to be clear about that. She's just someone who has been handed things her whole life and genuinely doesn't fully understand the weight of what she takes. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. But then she said something that surprised me. She said, "What I said about Kaylee, what Mom said, I know Maisie heard it. And I know that wasn't okay." I didn't say anything. Partly because I was shocked. Partly because I didn't trust it yet. "I'm not apologizing for Mom," she continued. "But I'm sorry it happened in front of Maisie." It wasn't a full apology. It was about 60% of one. But coming from Brenda, who has apologized to me maybe 3 times in our entire lives, it landed somewhere. Did I forgive her right then? Well, absolutely not. But I filed it away, same as Maisie files things away. 'Cause maybe it meant something. Or maybe it was just Brenda being strategic. I genuinely wasn't sure which. What I was sure about was that my mother hadn't called back. Hadn't followed up. Was waiting, I assumed, for me to come around on my own the way I always had before. She was about to wait a very long time. Because what I was planning, quietly, carefully, with Aunt Deborah's full encouragement, was not a confrontation. It wasn't a blow-up. It was something slower and more deliberate than that. And it started with Maisie's next birthday. Keep watching because what happened at that birthday changed the whole dynamic of this family. And not just for me. Maisie's birthday is in February. She turned 10 and she wanted 3 things. A chocolate cake with rainbow sprinkles, her favorite book series continued, and to go to this small pottery class she'd been asking about for months. Simple. Lovely. Very Maisie. I planned the whole thing myself. Just a small gathering at our apartment. My friend Carolyn came with her kids. Aunt Deborah drove up from Cincinnati with a wrapped gift and enough energy to fill the whole room. My dad Ronald showed up with a card and a $20 bill tucked inside, which is his love language, and I've made peace with that. My mother did not come. She sent a text. A text that said, "Give Maisie a kiss from Grandma. Feeling under the weather." No call. No gift. Nothing in the mail the following week. Kaylee's birthday, for reference, had been celebrated the previous October with a dinner at a restaurant, a gift from my mother, a phone call that lasted 40 minutes, and a card with a heartfelt handwritten note inside. I know because my mother told me about all of it, in detail, unprompted, on one of our 12-minute phone calls. So I documented it. Added it to my quiet, growing record of evidence that I was not, in fact, imagining things. Maisie had a wonderful birthday anyway. She made a lopsided little ceramic bowl in her pottery class and declared it the best thing she'd ever created. Deborah cried a little, which made Maisie laugh. We ate cake, and it was genuinely one of the nicest evenings we'd had in a long time. But I'd be lying if I said some part of me wasn't sitting with a cold, steady anger underneath all of it. The following week my mother called. Chatty, light, no mention of missing the birthday. She pivoted quickly to Brenda. How Brenda was doing, how Kaylee's enrichment program was going wonderfully, how proud she was. I let her talk. Then, when she paused, I said very calmly, Maisie made a ceramic bowl at her pottery class. For her birthday. The one last weekend. Beep. Oh, that's sweet. I'm sorry I couldn't make it, I really wasn't feeling well. You didn't send a card, Mom. Silence. I've been meaning to. It's been 8 days. She shifted. Got slightly defensive. Said she had a lot going on, that I knew she loved Maisie, that I was making her feel guilty for being sick. And here's where the old Laurel would have backed down. Would have said, I know it's fine, and changed the subject and swallowed the whole thing. Instead I said, I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I just want you to hear what it looks like from where I'm standing. And from where Maisie's standing. She didn't respond well to that. Got quiet in that particular icy way of hers. Said she'd call later in the week and wrapped up the conversation in under 3 minutes. I sat there after she hung up and thought, okay, so that's how it is. Around this time something unexpected happened with Brenda. She texted me a photo. It was Kaylee at school, holding up a project she'd done, a poster about different careers. And written across the top in Kaylee's handwriting was, I want to be a veterinarian because I want to help animals who can't help themselves. Brenda had written underneath it, thought you'd like this. Maisie and her horses, right? I stared at that text for a long time. It was such a small thing. A tiny bridge thrown across a lot of water. But it was the first time in years that Brenda had connected our daughters to each other instead of ranking them. I showed Maisie. Her face lit up. She said, Kaylee likes animals too? Apparently. Can we tell her about my horse drawings? So I texted Brenda back. Told her Maisie wanted Kaylee to see her sketchbook sometime. Brenda replied with 3 exclamation points and a heart. It was awkward and small and kind of wonderful. Meanwhile, I had made a decision about my mother. I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to issue an ultimatum. What I was going to do was pull back. Quietly, consistently, without announcement. Fewer calls initiated from my end. Shorter visits. And the next time she made a comment, any comment that placed Maisie beneath Kaylee, I was going to name it. Loud. In front of everyone. No more cleaning up rubble. No more changing the subject. Aunt Deborah called it strategic withdrawal with a standing offer to reconcile. I called it being done being the bigger person for free. Because here's what I'd realized. My mother wasn't going to change because I absorbed her behavior gracefully. She was going to change if she changed at all because someone finally made the cost of it visible. And very soon she was going to get the chance to see exactly what that cost looked like. Because Easter was coming. The whole family. One table. And I had quietly decided that this time, I was not going to be the one who kept the peace. You'll want to hear what happened at that table. I promise you I did not disappoint. Easter at my mother's house has a dress code, an unspoken seating arrangement, and enough passive aggression to power a small city. I arrived with Maisie in a yellow dress she'd picked herself, carrying a dish I'd made and absolutely nobody asked for, because that's what you do. Brenda was already there. Kaylee was in the living room. My dad was in the kitchen doing something useful and invisible, as is his tradition. My mother greeted me at the door with a hug and a, "You look tired, honey." First 30 seconds. A new record. I smiled and walked inside. The table was set beautifully. My mother does know how to set a table, I'll give her that. And for the first hour, everything was cautiously civil. Polite questions, safe topics, the kind of conversation that stays carefully in shallow water. Then my mother brought out a small wrapped gift. Set it in front of Kaylee at the table. Birthday adjacent, she said. Kaylee had done exceptionally well in her enrichment program and deserved something special. I watched Maisie's face. She didn't cry. She didn't say anything. She just very carefully set down her fork and looked at her plate with that same quiet stillness I'd seen at Thanksgiving. And something in me just stopped negotiating with itself. I said, "Mom, can I ask you something?" She looked up, pleasant, unsuspecting. "When was the last time you gave Maisie something special for doing well?" The table went very still. "Laurel," Brenda started. "I'm asking Mom." My mother's expression shifted through about 4 emotions in 2 seconds. Surprise, irritation, composure, and then that particular blankness she deploys when she wants to appear unbothered. "I treat both girls the same," she said. And I almost laughed. I genuinely almost laughed. "Mom, you missed her birthday. You didn't send a card. You didn't call. And today Kaylee gets a gift at the Easter table and Maisie is sitting right there. I kept my voice completely level. I'm not attacking you. I'm just describing what's happening. Total silence. My dad had stopped moving in the kitchen. Brenda looked at her plate. Then she looked up and said, quietly but clearly, "She's right, Mom." I turned to look at my sister. She wasn't looking at me, she was looking at our mother. And her expression was something I hadn't seen from her before. Uncomfortable. Honest. "Kaylee gets a lot," Brenda said. "I know that. And I've let it happen because it's easier. But Maisie's sitting right here." My mother opened her mouth, closed it. Kaylee, bless her 11-year-old heart, looked at Maisie and said, "Do you want to share it?" "It's a craft set. I have like 4 already." Maisie looked at me. I nodded. And she said, "Yeah, okay." Just like that. 2 kids, solving what 3 adults had been making complicated for years. My mother was quiet for a long moment. And then, and this is the part one genuinely did not see coming, her eyes got wet. Not dramatic crying. Just that sudden brightness that happens when someone is fighting it. She said very quietly, "I didn't realize how it looked." I wanted to say, "Yes you did." 'Cause I think on some level she had. But I also looked at her sitting there, 67 years old, and I thought about how she grew up, what her own mother had been like. And I understood that this was as close to cracking open as Patricia was going to get at an Easter table. So I said, "Now you do." That was it. No speech. No list of grievances. Just now you do. Dinner continued. Quieter than usual. But not bad quiet. More like the specific silence of people recalibrating. After we ate, my mother asked Maisie about her pottery bowl. Asked to see a picture. Maisie pulled up 3 photos on my phone and talked for about 4 minutes straight about clay consistency and glazing techniques. And my mother listened. Actually listened, with something genuine on her face. It wasn't a transformation. It wasn't a movie ending. But it was real and it was a start, and that meant more to me than any dramatic resolution would have. On the way home, Maisie was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Grandma asked about my bowl." She did. Maybe she's trying. 9 years old. 10 now I suppose. And already more generous than most adults I know. Maybe she is, baby. In the weeks after Easter, things shifted. Not perfectly, not completely, but noticeably. My mother started calling a little longer. Started asking about Maisie specifically. Brenda and I fell into something that felt cautiously like actual sisterhood. Texting occasionally, letting Kaylee and Maisie video call each other about animals and art. Deborah said, "See, you didn't need a blow-up. You just needed to stop being invisible." She was right. As usual. Do I think my mother is suddenly a changed woman? Well, she'll probably say something tone-deaf again within the next 6 months, and I'll have to decide all over again how to handle it. That's just Patricia. But the difference now is that I won't absorb it quietly. I won't clean up the rubble. I'll name it calmly and keep moving. And Maisie, my quiet, horse-drawing, pottery-making, sky-question-asking kid, she knows now, in whatever way a 10-year-old knows things, that her mother will not let her be erased. That's the part I'm most proud of. Not the comeback at Thanksgiving. Not the strategic withdrawal. Not even the Easter table moment. Just that my daughter knows I see her. Fully. Every single day. And nobody, not my mother, not family dynamics, not 36 years of conditioning, is going to change that. If any part of this resonated with you, I genuinely love to know. Drop it in the comments. And if you think I handled something wrong along the way, tell me that too. Can take it. If this story meant something to you, a like means more than you know. Thank you for sitting with me through all of it. Really.